Start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your spin, and I'm joined by my co-host Rex. And Rex, it was the international break. Fox basically hardly showed like really any of the Euro qualifying games. We did
Mm.
have some U.S. soccer, which I guess we'll get into. But I don't know. Did you? What did you do over this break to avoid all this?
Ooh, well, I watched a little bit of the international soccer matches, just a
Mhm.
few, but I also watched NWSL, which was pretty good. The
Oh.
we talking about the before the show. Paramount Plus, their coverage like is standard def, not HD. So it was kind of disappointing in that regard. The play was pretty good though, but it's just hard to watch it in SD, and they even have VAR there now, but they couldn't get HD, which is kind of disappointing. But
Oh,
and
that's
then
interesting.
well, yeah, yes. And you and I are on the same page with Fox taking over the international window and games. There was nothing on. There was one game on basically, and that was it. So it was kind of hard. I ended up watching like I forget who it even was. It might have been Norway versus someone on Saturday.
Norway, Spain. Well, did you watch the Denmark?
Yeah.
We were like texting with the Denmark game. Um,
Oh, right, that was a good one against
like
who was it
Kazakhstan.
against? Yeah,
Like
Kazakh, and they won. Yeah, that was a good game actually.
that game was absolutely wild. Denmark was
What was
winning
that on
2-0
FS1,
and ended up losing
FS2?
3-2. Yeah, it was.
That game was fun. Yeah, that was a good game. That was a really good game.
I mean, I'm with you because England would play basically after that, and I was like, oh, I'll just keep it on. And they showed like Iceland versus someone. I was like, wait, what?
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, Iceland.
I did something you're not really supposed to do. I was able to find it streaming in not the most legal ways. Um,
Ooh, pirate radio.
well, I didn't do anything like that. But anyways, all I will say is it wasn't English announcing. It was something I couldn't really understand. I mean,
uh,
one thing I guess I wanted to say is we did have some good basketball on, so I guess that kind of maybe helped fill some of this. And not to necessarily get philosophical, I did like have some notes kind of watching this because I wanted to kind of get this out there, you know, because watching the March Madness and the college basketball, I did have a couple like things that kind of went into my head that you're seeing a lot of this in like modern day football as well. So like you're seeing the importance of ball carriers that can handle being pressed. Because the teams that really struggled with that, turning it over, and you saw another thing you saw was what happens when after a team is able to kind of withstand the first wave of like a full court pressure. You basically see a fast break dunk or basically a fast break that maybe leads to a goal, and you see the risk and rewards of maybe pressing high and pressing often. Because the other part of that is you get a lot of turnovers and easy buckets because you're turning it over high. And then versus the low blocks, basically teams playing set defenses or zone or man, the attention was kind of the same. It required someone beating their man 1v1 to create gaps to appear. And we see that that's basically what the modern game in soccer is all about. So I just kind of wanted to get that out there. I mean,
interesting. Yeah.
some of the storylines that I thought interested me was Belgium have a new coach with Tedesco, the former I guess Leipzig coach, and he's off to a pretty strong 2 games. And part of that is Lukaku's back and firing for them. He had a really good game yesterday as well in the friendly versus Germany. Kevin De Bruyne is back, being absolutely amazing. Hopefully he had all of his juice for this window, and maybe he will be a little out of the tank this Saturday versus Liverpool because Kevin De Bruyne looked absolutely unreal yesterday. Um, I thought Hungary has maybe continued the Nations League form in both, and they were pretty good in Euros as well. They won their 2 games. But the
Yeah.
reason why I want to touch on this is a player that always keeps showing up to me. Um, when you think of someone that's playing in Germany, a midfielder, that you hear these valuations for Jude, and the guy that's showing up to me is Schlabberschei, maybe not Jude, which is interesting that, like, I'd never really hear his name being mentioned, for any kind of these big transfers, but Schlabberschei, and again, he had a really good, game on Saturday. He just keeps showing up to me, and then, maybe a slight, storyline is Spain. Spain didn't necessarily look great versus Holland, Hollandless, Norway. And that game, I think they ended up like winning 3-1, but it was or 3-0, but it was closer than the score suggested. And then they got pants yesterday by Scotland. So,
Yeah.
and frankly, I was kind of surprised to see that England haven't moved off Southgate. So in England played the game I saw versus I forget who they played, but the game I saw on Sunday, England didn't necessarily look that great or convincing either. I mean, they
Yeah.
they were able to win, I think, like 2-0, but that was, I guess maybe the only thing I could think of is because of the weird World Cup, how quickly it's turned around. Maybe that's the reason why they were like, "There's no reason in changing coaches," even though Spain changed coach, um,
Yeah, true.
and Belgium changed their coaches. So it's
Yeah.
weird how they're going with Sir Racecoat for one more break, and he's got a. I don't want to say it's win or bust, but with this kind of talent pool, you get the sense that they are maybe throwing their best chances away at winning something with this guy, sticking with this guy, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like the Belgium situation
I think so.
before the World Cup, where it was kind of like we got all this talent, they're getting older, we haven't won anything. This is kind of like your last chance. So I think maybe Euros will be Southgate's last chance, maybe if he makes it that far.
Yeah, I mean, it was just because the way that they're playing. Also, he made some weird comments. He always has had weird things with Trent Alexander-Arnold that he's not been shy about saying. He said some weird things about Florian Balogun, which I guess we'll
Really,
we'll get to. Basically, he talked about how
very
it's impressive what he's doing in France, but he's not doing it here. And he compared him to like Ollie Watkins, and he said, Ivan Toney, I've got to respect what they're doing in the Premier League. And that to me was kind of an uh-oh thing. That's maybe something that he thinks about in his head. That's maybe how like everyone in the FA thinks. It's maybe how everyone thinks. Oh, if you're not doing it in the Premier League, you're not doing it. Who cares what you're doing? But
yeah.
it's interesting he doesn't apply that to Jude Bellingham, who hasn't played a single minute in the APL as well. So I thought that was weird. And
It is kind of weird.
one
Might
thing
just
like
push Balogun further to USA, hopefully.
I think so. I mean, for him to say those comments when he was visiting us in Orlando,
Right.
supposedly when we
Yeah.
had a game in Orlando, things are looking good for us. And we're gonna get to what happened with the U.S. We'll spend probably the majority of our time on that. We're gonna do a mini Champions League, I guess, preview. We're not gonna go necessarily into too much depth. But I mean that's pretty much gonna be our show this week. We didn't necessarily cover a ton of the international the World Cup qualifying games because mostly we couldn't really see them. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Pretty much.
the as they say, the show must go on, and this will basically just kind of a warm up show for what's about to happen this next weekend because it kicks off with Liverpool and Man City, but also I think on Monday it's Dortmund versus Bayern in a massive game that maybe could decide the title in Germany. There's a lot of big club games that are just about to kick off, so
Oh
just
yeah.
kind of just we'll just this is a nice little break to kind of get us to I guess to get us to prepare for that. I guess we'll say. Um, but another thing this did is we had some bonker news kind of break out because I thought the Fiera sacking was going to be surprising, and in the same few days, Bayern decided to move away from Nagelsmann, hiring Thomas Tuchel as his replacement right before that match versus Dortmund, and they had Man City in the Champions League, and then Antonio Conte announces that he's leaving, effective immediately, leaving his former assistant Christian Stellini in charge. And already Nagelsmann's being like tossed around there, as well as Pochettino as well. And so, out of nowhere, Spurs and the Conte saga really kind of comes to an end. And I don't know, Rex. I mean, do any of the storylines like anything you want to say about those?
Well, the Conte one didn't surprise us too much, just because basically the week before he got sacked, he was railing in that post game or pre game speech. I forget which one interview.
Hmm.
He was railing against the club and the club hierarchy. So you could kind of see maybe that was coming, and results were kind of roller coastery as well. So that didn't help. But the Bayern one is surprising. I know they lost right before the international break, and they lost the lead also in the Bundesliga, so I know that plays a factor into it. But man, that I don't know, it's just kind of crazy because Nagelsmann hasn't done a bad job. They won the Bundesliga last year, which is to be expected, but still, and they're in the Champions League still against City. That's a tough draw, and only like 2 weeks about. So I don't know. I mean, I get why they did it, but it's kind of weird. Like at least for your Champions League game, you only have 2 weeks with this new coach, and it's a huge Champions League game. and you probably, I mean, I'm guessing you kind of got rid of Nagelsmann because you think you should be winning the Premier, I mean, the Champions League at least, and that's why they got rid of him. I'm guessing
I mean,
because I mean,
their
we
form in
won
the
Champions League
Champions
last
League
year.
their form in the Champions League has been good.
It's really good,
Uh,
yeah. So it just doesn't
I
it
if
doesn't
any
make much sense
if anything,
there, but
they've just been dropping too many games in the
in
Bundesliga.
Bundesliga,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I don't know. That could come back to haunt them though, Ben. If they lose against City, I mean, you could only blame not necessarily Tuchel, but maybe the Bayern board for getting rid of Nagelsmann because, like you said, Champions League this year with Nagelsmann, their form has been great. If they all of a sudden lose to City and get knocked out, I think you could blame the board and them firing Nagelsmann. I think you could put it on them. But
mhm.
I mean, I guess they're worried about their domestic form, and they were like, we got to make a change now before it's too late because they're still only what a point off first place
And
in the
a
Bundesliga.
and it's just it's crazy how, like, just within a day, you heard Nagelsmann's name being tossed around, like, immediately, to the Spurs job, and so,
Oh yeah,
if that
yeah,
happens, that would be wild as
that
well.
would be.
I mean, it's all kind of rumor and kinda conjecture, maybe gossipy, at this point, but I have seen that, some of the players, specifically, there was a locker room kind of component to this, where either Mane or someone was complaining to him about like not necessarily getting playing time, and then I guess Nagelsmann didn't discipline him enough. Was the kind of the way that the story went, and so the next game Mane basically started, and players were like, "What the hell? So we can bully you to get playing time?" Another thing was I saw that he's apparently dating a reporter, and the players didn't necessarily respect her or didn't necessarily trust her around him. But again,
Really,
this is all kind of gossipy. It's from that build
that's
uh,
interesting.
outlet, but
Yeah,
maybe I shouldn't say that because I am kind of spreading gossip. But that to me is the only thing that maybe somewhat makes sense. If there was something happening behind the scenes, because you're right, the necessarily form wasn't necessarily sackable. I mean,
yeah,
if they beat Dortmund, they basically pass them, and they likely do control their fate in the Bundesliga. And yeah, drawing City, you've drawn City. That's not necessarily Nagelsmann's fault. You've done
yeah,
everything you need to in the Champions League, and we're going to get to Bayern when we talk to in the Champions League. They've only conceded 2 goals. They've got the best defense in the tournament, and they've been good. And they went through a fairly tough group. Wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. It wasn't like
Wasn't
the
Barca and
easiest.
Benfica? It wasn't the easiest
Yeah,
group.
yeah, yeah. They knocked out Barca to the Europa League.
Yeah. So that was just kind of wild. But anyways, before we get to the Champions League, we will spend a little time talking about what happened with the U.S. We don't necessarily have to talk a ton of it, but because it was just uh, Grenada and El Salvador. But to be honest, I'm actually going to do something I don't normally do. I'm somewhat going to praise what I saw, or I guess
Ooh,
talk them up a little bit because I did like the changes, and I'm gonna give some compliments to the interim manager Anthony Hudson. So I don't know. We'll maybe get started with the first game. I mean, U.S. wins 7-0. Now this is a Granada team that I think they also beat like 5 or 6-0 last year as well, and this was the game that. The U.S. was only winning like 1 or 2-0 at halftime, and then Jesus Ferreira came on, basically scored 4 goals, and basically became our striker for the next year.
that's right.
So there's some of that, but frankly, we saw something that we've needed to see. I mean, it's a new window, and we saw a little shakeup. So we saw Brian Reynolds get his first start. Played at right back. We saw Mark McKenzie and Trusty come. Trusty got his debut. Now again, this is just Granada. They weren't necessarily tested, but it's good to see like new players come in. And we saw Scaly
Oh
finally
yeah,
play. And Scaly's a right back, and he played at left back, and I thought he had a good game. We
yeah,
saw McKinney and Luca De La Torre, kind of as the midfield pivot. We saw Gio Reyna back into the squad. That was maybe a storyline as well, for reasons that I guess people that have followed the U.S. soccer know. We don't necessarily have to go through that. And we saw Pepe return, and Pepe immediately showed up and gave his dividends with getting the first goal. And Pulisic basically had the first 2 assists in the game, and I think he ended up actually scoring at the very end. But Pulisic had a good game as well. And then we saw some people come on as subs. We saw Zendejas kind of get some minutes here and there. We saw him a little bit in the January window, but it was good to see him again. Though he didn't necessarily, he started in the El Salvador game and didn't have his best game, but yeah, it was good to see just kind of new players coming in and getting the shots. We didn't see uh, 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 Aaron. We didn't see necessarily. Uh, I would say like MLS players, but um,
Yeah, you had no MLS players in this window, so
yeah. So I think really the only MLS player I think was Robinson. So there was a bunch of but there's a bunch of new storylines. So I think that was good, and it's only these two teams, but you play what's in front of you, and for the most part, I liked what I saw.
yeah, yeah, me too. I mean, it was Granada, but they scored 7. That's always a good thing, and all you can really do is play well against the teams that are scheduled. I couldn't help thinking like we're playing Granada and El Salvador, and England's playing like Italy or Belgium's playing Germany. So it's kind of like,
Hmm.
uh, but again, what can you do? I mean, you can only play the teams that you're drawn against. So
There's some of that, but like some of the teams I saw that like I don't know who it wasn't necessarily England, but like some big team was playing like Liechtenstein or
true, yeah, that's true.
I saw with the I saw a couple other like names like Estonia. Like, I think that's who like Hungary beat. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
not it's
true.
all or like Faroe Islands. I think
Oh,
they're
Faroe Islands.
they're in qualifying. So it's they have some of that as well. I mean, the another thing that was interesting was we saw a lineup change. So or formation change. We actually did see a 4-2-3-1, something that just Berhalter just never did. He never changed his shape ever. And not only that, we basically saw players with free roles, so it was a lot more fluid. Pulisic was basically played on left wing, but was kind of playing a little bit more in the middle. Pepe was still dropping deep, and they're still there was more movement. I thought. Another thing too is it was interesting to see our team play without Tyler Adams. Now we've
Yeah,
struggled a little bit normally when we've done that, and we're gonna get to the El Salvador game. El Salvador either beat us or tied us in qualifying, and we played them last year. I guess in Nations League, and I think we only beat them 1-0, and it was a goal in like the 90th minute. So this is a team we normally struggle against, to be honest. So
yeah,
um,
yeah. That's true. That's a
what
good
did you
point.
th- what did you think of Gio Reyna returning?
He wasn't his best, but you can see obviously there's a lot of potential there. But he wasn't at his best. But I think it was nice to
Yeah,
just get him out there on the field, and I mean, I'm sure everything that's been going on is kind of weighing on him a little bit, at least mentally. So I think it was good for him to just get out there and get some minutes for USA and kind of put everything behind him, hopefully. And none of it might not even be his fault. Like it seems like it's his parents. And now maybe he was like pushing his parents, but we don't know that. So I think it was good just to get him out there at least. Like I said, he didn't play that great, but he wasn't like that poor either. I think it's just good to get him minutes and to put all the everything from last year behind him. I guess it's some of this year too, but
yeah. I mean, well, because especially what's come out with his dad, because his dad I
yeah,
think was going to
dad
be
and mom.
the sporting director, I think, for like Austin, like the MLS team, and I, th- I think
Yeah,
I
I think
think
it was awesome.
I think he's been relieved of that. And you're right, the stuff that's come out with his mom as well, because they've both been involved.
Yeah.
Um, the only thing I
Yep.
could I could think of, like, that I guess, like, you could maybe I wouldn't necessarily fault him, but maybe, like, where he did have, I guess, some role in this. I mean, we can't necessarily speak on what his attitude was, but Berhalter
Yeah.
told him to lie, basically being like, "Tell reporters that the reason why you're not getting minutes is because you're injured." And he was basically he leaked it out that he's not injured, and
Yeah.
that's when a lot of the controversy and everything kind of spiked out. But anyways, we don't have to go down that road again. We will move on to
Yeah.
the US win 7-1. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the best to concede, but what's funny is uh, listening to how the pregame went. They were just like, I want to see some kind of scoring because we saw in the January window. I don't think we scored. We had two games where it was basically 0-0, and it was a
But yeah.
so. Already you're seeing a little bit more improvement. Now maybe the player pool was significantly better. That probably helped as well. I mean, just the main thing is seeing Pepe back. it just reminded me like there's a regardless of what happened with the Gio Reyna stuff, Berhalter should not be even thought about as returning again, just simply by not having this guy even involved in not just like starting for us, just not even included in the final roster.
Mhm.
Because not only what he's doing in I mean what he's doing in Eredivisie is merit on its own, but yeah, I'm trying to think. He was probably our most important player in qualifying.
Yeah,
And it was just weird how after we basically secured qualifying, we started seeing Jesus Ferreira played instead. We basically didn't see Pepe, and then there was the whole stand. There was like anytime like Pepe would get minutes, there would be like this like big stat. Oh, he's gone 10 games without like scoring for us. Oh, maybe we don't need him. Well, you reap what you sow there. So
that's true.
I liked what we saw, and basically we'll get to the El Salvador game. Pepe didn't even start; it was Daryl DK. But Pepe came on, and he basically became the hero. But we did see a different lineups here. So we saw Dest return. We saw is it Mark Robinson? It's not Anthony.
Yeah.
We saw
Miles right.
Miles Robinson return. Which makes sense. Like I actually liked what Anthony Hudson even said here. He basically said uh, we had he called out and said, "We have one MLS player that I guess saw minutes, and it was Robinson, and we thought it was worth it to give him a shot because he probably was going to be our starting center back if not for that injury. He, like, did his
Yeah.
Achilles.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
another
really
reason
hard in.
that's another reason to get out of the MLS, to be honest, because players playing on turf fields, that in 2023 should not be a thing right now. And I think that kind of led to it. And then, we saw Tim Ream, play again, and Tim Ream, almost, you, like, even texted, he either saved a goal or almost scored.
Blocked
So
him off the line. Yeah.
he had a good game, and then Anthony Robinson, as well, but, McKennie and Musa, I think, is maybe our best, without, Tyler Adams. I think that's maybe our best midfield. We saw Gio Reyna, again, played as almost like a free 10. That didn't necessarily work, which we'll maybe get to, and then we saw Zendejas get a start, Pulisic, and then DK. Um and it was good. It was interesting to see basically a 4-2-3-1 again, but it was 4-4-2 out of possession. But I don't know if you kind of noticed this. There was a halftime. It didn't necessarily work in that first half. Even the coach even said afterwards that he didn't like the slow buildup, and frankly, we weren't really pressing them either. El Salvador was actually having pretty good time when they were able to get on the ball, and so basically, I thought what we saw was a 4-2-4 kind of shape, where basically it was a front four, and basically the idea was to press high in forming a front four. And I thought we were able to press high. We were able to kind of win the ball back quicker and higher up. And then Pepe kind of came on as a sub and immediately was the difference maker. And it's a fantastic through ball by McKinney, which is good to see from him playing it in a deeper role. And then it's a great finish. And what's interesting too is something that I saw was Daryl DK when he was getting on the ball. He was looking for contact and looking to go down and buy fouls. And that was basically playing into what El Salvador wanted to do. It seemed like they wanted to kind of muck up the game a little bit. Pepe has a chance to maybe go down here. Maybe it's a PK or not. He stays on his feet. And because he's strong on the ball, he's able to get the goal that way because he shows good balance staying on his feet, and then it's a nice little chip over the keeper.
Yeah, brilliant finish, and like you said, perfect time for him to come on and score. And he ends up with 3 goals in this 2 game span here. So yeah, it's good, but I'm kind of like you. It's kind of like why didn't he at least get on that plane to the World Cup? Why didn't Berhalter pick him? It looks really stupid in hindsight, especially him coming on and scoring goals. He basically did everything you asked him to do, even coming off on from the bench in a tight game and getting the winner. So
Mhm.
I don't know. Yeah, it's good. It's good, but it does make me question Berhalter not bringing him to the World Cup.
And I really do hope that becomes a little bit more in the lexicon or the more how people think about this when because there is a possibility that he does return. They haven't necessarily made a decision on that, and I don't want it to be about the Gio Reyna stuff or want it to be about possibly what he did 20 years ago with that story. I mean not necessarily to downplay that, but I just like the actual performance wise, I think is worth focus on as well. I don't think he was good performing either.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then just sticking on Hudson for here because he hasn't necessarily had the best resume. I remember he's when he was in charge of the MLS team in Salt Lake, he maybe had like the worst record ever for a head coach. But
He's
I do like not only did it's interesting to see kind of a tactical tweaks, that we didn't see Berhalter try. Um, it was interesting to also see kind of the subs come in because he brought on Brendan Aronson, he brought on Luca Della Torre, and brought on Pepe when he needed to, and all 3 looked really good. And maybe we don't win this game without those changes. So
yeah, yeah, potentially.
it's small potatoes, for here, but just kind of in the moment, I think it's worth when someone does something good, I think it's worth praising. You don't necessarily have to make it to be bigger than it is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna credit Hudson here for what he did, and I liked what I saw.
Yeah, I mean, it was good. It was best we could do. I mean,
Yeah,
for the most part. So yeah, yeah, it was one. It wasn't bad. I mean, I don't think he's like the coach to lead us into the future, perhaps.
yeah,
But you know, he's doing the best he can in this kind of caretaker role. So you know, yeah, no complaints from me, really.
and the biggest thing when you're a caretaker is to set your team up for at least the next guy. So at least
Yeah,
you've installed some ideas. And another thing too, to maybe talk about this window is if we are able to get Florian Balogun, as well. This has been a successful 2023.
oh hell
Um,
yeah.
so
He would change the game potentially for us, and we really have been like craving this type of striker too. So
yep,
if we got him, that would be amazing. And I mean, it's trending in the right direction so far. I think. You mentioned like he went to the camp in Orlando, we think, and then obviously he's been tweeting about USA or liking USA tweets
he's been like
all the
hanging out with
time.
them and
So
like following on Insta. Apparently these days that is how you actually can get an idea of where it's going because he's not following England, he's following us apparently. Um, so
it would be yeah, it'd be amazing. If we got him.
and
I'm excited.
maybe he can talk to like Yunus Musa because Yunus Musa had a chance to play for England as well, and he chose us. And
Yeah, yeah, true. There's a couple of guys like that. Either I mean maybe not England, but you know like Dest I think could have played
Dust could
for
have played for
Netherlands.
Holland. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and then there's a couple other guys. So yeah, yeah, it's good.
And
It's
that
really
that
good.
and that is maybe the one thing to, like, maybe praise Berhalter a little bit because, before, what was it? Bruce Arena,
Yeah,
there was Klinsmann was trying to do this too, and then there was, like, a bunch of backlash, where it was like, "Oh, are these people really American? Do they want it as much as we do because they weren't born here?" There was a lot of, like, ugliness about that. I'm glad that that's
yeah,
out the window because getting players this is a way to kind of improve your squad, kind of a cheeky way, by getting dual nationals, and
yeah,
it
it works.
immediately improves your squad. So,
Yeah, yeah. We
uh,
saw. I mean, like Qatar and some other international teams have definitely done that too. I remember like Spain and Brazil always had people flip flopping like
mhm,
Costa and things like that. So it works. It definitely works. And you got to do all you can to get some of these dual nationals because I mean we mentioned just a couple of them that are like stars for the USA team. So it's definitely important. It's really important. And you know if he's not going to get playing time for England and England's going to constantly underestimate him. Then he's going, you know, he's probably going to get frustrated and want to play. And at the
especially
United States, he can play.
especially if Southgate's gonna do something as stupid as that. Also, something for him to maybe think about is, no matter what, well, I guess, England's always gonna be in the World Cup and in the big competitions, but it is going to be, we're gonna be hosting it, and that's gonna be a unique experience as well.
True. Yeah,
So
that too.
yeah,
Yeah. So I don't know. It's exciting times potentially,
I think so. Yeah, and
and if we get Balogun, I'll be pumped.
I've been more pessimistic, to be honest, and I don't want this to go away. And another thing, like 2024 is going to be really big for us because we're invited into the Copa, I believe, and
Yeah.
that's going to be a real chance to maybe do uh, maybe a practice through, a run through, essentially.
Yeah. And we'll finally
Europe
get some good competition to
Europe
play.
teams always get their Euros as like a World Cup preview, which I'm always kind of annoyed about. So this is going to give us a real chance to kind of have something similar to that because I've never thought the Gold Cup sets us up well. So we're going to
Yeah.
be able to go against the big boys in South America with
Yeah.
Argentina, Brazil, and
Brazil, Chile. Yeah,
Colombia,
it would be nice.
Ecuador.
Like the Gold Cup's better than nothing, but like you said, the competition just it's not great. So it's not really going to do a whole lot to get you ready for playing like big time clubs. But the Copa will for sure.
Yep. And I mean, were there any? I guess we kind of talked about this a little bit. Were there any maybe disappointments that you had? Um, yeah, I guess we talked a little bit about Reina. One thing I'm gonna say, I mean, I'll be curious if you kind of notice this. I kind of tweeted about this, and Alex kind of laughed at me, so maybe it was just me kind of noticing. But uh, when you kind of play with like a number 10, kind of like cam roll in this like 4-2-3-1, when like the person's underneath the striker,
Yeah.
that person needs to be kind of your ball carrier. You need to, or that person needs to get the ball and needs to kind of be. He needs to make the right decisions. And the things that I saw too much was he was getting the ball and was quickly to either passing, getting out of his feet, or he was basically looking to kind of shoot and turn way too
Mhm.
often when maybe he had a chance to maybe play someone through. And
Right.
one thing that I've noticed, I think, a little bit more in the second half was it seemed Pulisic was more in that role as well. He wasn't necessarily getting the ball in the wing; he was getting the ball more in kind of the half space in the middle third, and I thought we looked better when that was happening. So that was
Yeah, that's
maybe
true.
just kind of a little a critique. Drana again maybe hasn't necessarily been with a lot of these guys recently, so maybe
Yeah.
there's some of that, but he does kind of play this role at Dortmund. So I was a little disappointed, I guess I would say, with that. And then Zidane scored a nice goal, but I thought he this was maybe a little too much for him. He seemed to struggle to kind of get to influence the game, and I thought at least in that first half he was playing too far back. He wasn't necessarily pressing high, which even like the coach even like kind of talked about. And then Daryl DK, I thought
Yeah.
especially compared to what Pepe did, Daryl DK I guess maybe showed that he maybe still has a little time to go.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree with that assessment. But well, I mean, we like him, and he has a future. We think with the national team. So hopefully, it's just more minutes under his belt internationally. And I mean, he did. I don't know. He looked a little off from what we used to seeing from him for the international side. So maybe it was just a little bit of rust or something. I don't know. But
Could
I
be.
mean, he's still like he's so big. He's such a big striker that I think I think he'll be okay. But yeah. Um, I wanted a little bit more out of him, and it definitely seemed like Pepe was the guy that kind of won this little international window for sure with his 3 goals.
Yeah, because I mean, just another thing that Pepe kind of offers, it's nice to have your number 9 obviously put away chances and be a goal scorer, but just the kind of runs that he's making, it seems to be different than
True.
DK. And another
Yeah.
thing too is when he runs to the ball, he's good at linking up. He's good at holding up, but he's also he'll do like a clever like 1-2 clever like touch to get the ball out to kind of set other people up. Which it just feels like he's developed a little quicker than I guess other people in our striker pool. And again,
Yeah.
it is insane that he wasn't at least like picked. Because one of the guys, I even forget his name. There was someone that even got minutes for us versus England, and I guess
Yeah.
versus
So
Holland. But he even scored, and I forget his name. And I
who
have a
was it?
feeling he probably won't be invited for the next big window.
Yeah, he might not be. Shoot, now I can't remember his name.
You remember what I'm talking about? He
Yeah,
scored versus Holland. He
he was
was a big striker as
tall.
well, but
Yeah, really tall.
it's just
Shoot,
it was so weird
can't remember.
how Berhalter recognized he needed to bring at least someone that fitted that kind of profile. Obviously, Daryl DK was injured at that point, and he picked that guy over Pepe, and it was just that never rubbed me the right way. And also, yes, Ferreira didn't necessarily look great, and apparently he hasn't necessarily had his best start to MLS season. So, and Ferreira is young too, and this is necessarily I don't necessarily want to put this on him either. It was just kind of that's been the way that it's kind of been dragged out. So, anyways,
Oh, it's Haji Wright. Haji Wright was the
right,
guy.
yeah, that's it. Haji
Yeah,
Wright,
yeah, yeah.
good job.
Google.
Yeah, because I mean, especially if we get Balogun, that's another player that Wright's gonna, and you imagine Baby DK is gonna be above Haji, right?
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
Pepe hopefully too. But
um,
at the very worst, like if we did Balogun, like Pepe is a serviceable backup. We think, or maybe he could play force his way in the lineup and play wide. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I'll take all the good players we can get. I don't care if they're doing national. We have to beg them to play. Like it doesn't matter to me because, like you said, like Musa, Dest, a bunch of other guys we got, and I mean, there's always been a couple guys that we had, like Jermaine Jones, I guess could have been German international too, and we got him. So
and I'm curious if now we know his father was, I guess, in I don't actually remember where his father's from, but someone we didn't even see this window. The George, wait, not George, George Weah,
Oh,
Tim,
wait,
Tim
yeah.
Weah. Maybe
Yeah.
had a chance to pick someone else other than us. That we benefited from as well. We
Oh,
didn't.
yeah, true.
We haven't even seen him this window. And apparently, from what I've seen, he's maybe a better right back than he is kind of winger. Apparently, he sometimes plays fullback
Really?
for Lille. Anyway,
That's interesting.
we'll move on to the Champions League, and I mean the draw is kind of the story as well. I mean it's AC Milan and Napoli, Benfica and Inter on one side, and then all the big boys essentially, Chelsea, Real Madrid, and then Man City and a Nagelsmann-less Bayern team. And so that means either one, probably maybe we'll throw Benfica in there as well, but maybe one of the three Italian sides is going to be able to get to the final. And
Yeah,
all of again, to everyone that maybe
crazy.
people would have picked before this season started is gonna have to face each other, with 2 legs. So Man City has to get 2 legs of either Real Madrid, Chelsea, or Bayern. So which Pepe
Ugh.
isn't probably loving.
No, not at all. Yeah, and there's a lot of interconnections between the City and Bayern matchup because it's not only Pep coached at both, but
Okay.
it's also João Cancelo
Cancelo's over there. Yeah.
immediately up against the former team. I'm sure he didn't think he'd see City that soon,
I wonder if
but
he'll be able
so
to
that's
play.
another tasty. I think
Sometimes
so. Well, I don't know actually.
sometimes there's goofy stuff about that.
Yeah, it depends on. I guess sometimes clauses are inserted into the contract and
Yeah.
things. So I don't know. That's interesting. I might have to look into that because I mean I hope he plays
Because
because
Lukonga wasn't able to
he's
play versus
fun to
Arsenal.
watch.
Arsenal lame.
Yeah, yeah. But I think since it's Champions League, it's a little different
Okay.
because because Tellus can play against for Sevilla against United, right?
Yeah, but Alex
S-
texted that United allowed it.
Oh, they
Um,
allowed it,
well,
so they didn't.
that's the way he texted. So I don't know.
Huh. Okay. Huh. That's gonna be interesting too.
I mean, we'll move on. We'll get started with Bayern Munich. But I mean, yeah, they're second place in the league, 52 points, 25 games played. So I mean, the 1 point behind Dortmund. But when we get to other teams, what they've done with 25 games played, you'll see that 52 point is maybe the reason why, the Bayern hierarchy weren't necessarily impressed with Nagelsmann. I mean, their last 5 games in the league, they did lose to Gladbach 3-2. They beat Berlin 3-0. They beat Stuttgart 2-1. They beat Augsburg 5-3, and then they lost to Leverkusen, like you said, 2-1. And then they're running the Champions League. They were 6-0 in the group stage. They're the only team to win every game. And we mentioned the teams that they had in their group stage, and it was 1-0 versus PSG, and then 2-0 over PSG. So 3-0 aggregate versus the PSG in the first game wasn't necessarily that strong, but in that second game there was a healthy and fit Mbappe, and Bayern's back line looked very very good the first time. Delict, Upamecano, did a job on them. So
Yeah, I think so.
and
Yeah.
Cancelo didn't even play that second game.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then he was subbed out in the Leverkusen line as well,
Hmm.
and just a weird formation too sometimes for Bayern. Like this Leverkusen game, they played a 3-1-4-2, and it just looks weird. You have like Alfonso Davies in the midfield, instead of playing like fullback, and Cancelo's up in the midfield as well, and their strikers were Mane and Mueller, which on paper would be nice, but I don't know. It just didn't. It didn't really work, and it's just weird. Like we talked about how good they've been in the Champions League, and they've just been like streaky in the Bundesliga, especially as of late. So it's just weird to see like them dominate the harder competition, and just be so roller coastery in the Bundesliga, which obviously isn't as hard as some of these Champions League matchups that Bayern got.
Well, it is very weird. It's funny too because when I guess Bayern was doing their USA tour, Nagelsmann did some kind of interview with like the Green Bay coach, and the Green Bay guy was like basically like, "Who's your in our sport? The quarterback is the most important position. Who is the most important position in for your sport?" And Nagelsmann actually, without even thinking, said a number six, basically a CDM. Because of how much he can link between the defense and the midfield, and you can either stop stop attacks in that spot, or you can maybe get started, and you can be maybe a guy you can help when someone's being pressed. But what's interesting is you think about all the time, or as long as Nagelsmann's been at Bayern, he hasn't had a single number 6. Like, he's played Kimmich there. And I don't think
Yeah.
Kimmich is a lone CDM as good as he is. Kimmich can be bullied. And it's very funny how during this whole time, he's tried maybe Goretzka and Kimmich as almost like a pivot. They've never been able to move on from losing Thiago, in my opinion. Um, and
Yeah.
it seems like Goretzka isn't necessarily the player that he was, before the injury because he's returned from injury and he hasn't been good for Germany and he hasn't been good for Bayern, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because him and Kimmich would be a great partnership before Gretzky's injury, but yeah, he hasn't. He just hasn't been able to play, the same way he did before he got hurt. And I mean, Mane's been kind of streaky too,
Mane
as
hasn't
well.
worked out.
So
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, you can say he hasn't worked out. Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
we'll get to the key stats. So, I mean, goal scorer, they've got 21 goals in this Champions League only. So they're tied for fourth. They've only conceded 2, which is amazing. So they're the
Nice.
first in that category. The top scorer is Sane and Choupo-Moting with 4 goals. And then for players of the season, I had Kimmich. Basically, the do-it-all midfielder, even though I just kind of like talked him down a little bit. But he's basically sometimes he's asked to play in midfield all by himself because he'll sometimes have someone like Musiala kind of next to him, but Musiala will leave him. And,
Yeah,
basically Bayern will have like a front 5, and then it's just like Kimmich by himself, and then you have like the back line. And then you kind of mentioned it, Mane hasn't necessarily worked out. They've lost Lewandowski, and what they've done is they've been able to somewhat replace him. It's not necessarily like for like, but they've been able to get something out of Choupo-Moting. And that's really helped them as well. So it's worth kind of saying there.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just taking anything you can get from him
Yeah.
will work for sure.
I mean, for the positives, I put down that the defense has been stellar. You can look at, I mentioned what they did versus PSG and Mbappe, but yeah, the pressing versus PSG I thought was next level. And one thing that was funny is that I texted basically Jeremy is it's fitting how they scored their goal to basically win the game or win the leg versus PSG because what they did is they pressed super high and they were able to force Verratti into a turnover. And the
Yeah,
funny thing about that was, the first thought that came to my head is this is a goal that PSG just can't score. And in the modern game, you almost kind of need something like this because Mbappe and Messi or whatnot are not going to press high like that. And
yeah, that's true.
so they were able to just kind of fool. Verratti is not someone you normally think about making mistakes, and they did there. Um, as far as concerns and negatives, I did have not replacing Thiago. Over the last few years, even though
Yeah,
that is a few years back, but you think about they've lost Hansi Flick since winning the Champions League. They've lost Lewandowski, but I think they've also lost Thiago, and they've tried to replace Lewandowski with Mane, and that hasn't necessarily worked out. And then another thing I thought was Sane, Gnabry, and Mane, even Musiala, almost kind of the same player. They like playing in the half space. Mane can beat someone off the dribble, but it seems like all of them basically lack pace to play out wide. The only one they have is like maybe Coman. Um,
yeah, coming.
so it'll be
Maybe
interesting.
Sane, but
It'll be interesting. Sane to me is almost like a number 10 these days. But
yeah, well,
and
yeah,
and
that's
it
his number.
it seemed well, to be honest, it seemed Nagelsmann didn't necessarily know how to handle that either. There was never really
Yeah.
a consistent front line for him, and so the lead storyline really is Nagelsmann firing and Tuchel hiring. I mean, what do you maybe expect to see what Tuchel to do with this team?
Man, I honestly, I don't know. I think he'll probably try to figure out a solid starting 11 and run with those guys.
Hmm.
Maybe get those guys like just used to playing like a normal formation and not changing everything all the time. Maybe he'll go back to a back four too. Maybe he'll do like Delit, Upamecano, and then maybe Davies and Pavard are like his fullbacks, or maybe Cancelo. I don't know. I mean, he's got a lot of options though. I think just looking at the lineup. I mean, some of these guys aren't, like you mentioned, like Goretzka, Sane. They're not necessarily the same that they were like a couple years ago. So like maybe you can try to get the best out of that Mane too, get the best out of those guys. But I think if you just went with a solid formation and didn't change things around too much, it would just provide a little bit more stability in the league, maybe.
Hmm.
And obviously rotate some of those guys, but I mean, like I would just want like put Davis back at left back, or if you're gonna put him up high, put him like at left mid. None of this like playing in the center of the park kind of thing. He just
Yeah.
just play the players where they play. Play Cancelo at right back. I don't know. I think it'd be okay though, because like you mentioned, they do have a strong defense. So at worst, you can kind of Tuchel can rely on them for a couple games until they kind of figure things out and get going offensively. I don't know, but it's there's a lot of talent here. It's a good job, and I think Tuchel will figure it out. But if they get knocked out of the Champions League, and I mean, even if they won the Bundesliga and they got knocked out of the Champions League, I don't know if they would keep summer. They probably would, but if they finish second and get knocked out of the Champions League, I mean, Tuchel could be gone at the end of the year or in the summer,
I mean,
especially with this lineup they got.
well, the thing to Tuchel's like known for like always like getting into it with his players. Like he comes in and he does do good jobs. He does do good job turning around, but it's never able to last. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
People
that's
may
true.
it's not just what he did at Chelsea. Tuchel was the one that actually got PSG to the final. People maybe forget that, and
That's right.
he was such like I guess a narcissist or something. There was some such a weird thing with like him and the PSG players that they were like, please, please leave. Other than like Thiago Silva, I guess ended up like following him to Chelsea. That was kind of funny,
Yeah,
but
that was fun.
he's never able to kind of stay where he is. But I think he's maybe the best manager that PSG had. I mean, he was able to get PSG to at least the final where to do the one thing that they do care about. So one thing I'm
Yeah,
interested to see is you mentioned Mane. I'm very curious to see if he can get maybe more out of Mane and Gnabry. Um,
yeah,
uh, you know, Musiala and Sane kind of stagnated the season as well, but you know, basically it seems like he basically plays a 3-4-3 in some respects, and what he does is really it's a 3-4, almost like 2-1, like two players that kind of play in the half space, and then you have the striker. So you have Choupo-Moting that can be the lead striker, and you can play Davies and maybe Cancelo as the wing backs, and maybe play them
yeah. You
high.
could.
I don't necessarily know who you play next to. You still have the issue of who do you play next to Kimmich. If it's Musiala, he's got to learn how he can't necessarily just leave him to be left. But if he can learn to be a pivot midfielder, that would be a pretty strong. Uh, I think that would be a pretty decent like way to foundation to start. And then I would like to see Mane and Gnabry almost like a free roll, almost like double tens.
Mm,
Basically like we saw with Tuchel with Mason Mount, and he was able to kind of do there with Chelsea there. So he wouldn't make Mane a wide player. He would make Mane almost like a second striker, in some respects. I think he could still do a job there and still work there. So I'd be curious to kind of see that.
yeah, yeah. I think he's got a lot of potential with this team. So I don't know. It's just more storylines too. It'll be very interesting to see what he does. But I think he will have a bit of a short leash just because of how talented this team is and how well Nagelsmann did in the Champions League too.
And he's already made some comments where because of we'll get to Chelsea because of the financial fair play is so wild that they are going to have to basically have a fire sale of players. And Tuchel has already said I would take Mason Mount at Bayern. So it'll be
Really,
interesting to see
huh.
if maybe that would happen.
That's interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
All right, we'll
Weird.
move on to Man City. They're in second place in the league, courtesy of one team. But for 27 games played, they have 61 points. So that kind of shows you, that kind of compares you a little bit to what Bayern has done in the Bundesliga. Let's see. For the last 5 games in the league, they did draw Leipzig in their first round. But since then it's 4-1 over Bournemouth, 3-0 with the Bristol City FA win. It's 2-1 or 2-0 win over Newcastle, a 1-0 win over Palace, and then the 7-0 win over Leipzig, and then the 6-0 win over Burnley. So Man City have definitely started to heat up a little bit. Holland started to heat up. I think Holland's like 8 goals in the last like 2 games. And then
Jeez.
in Leipzig, they did draw the first game and then ended up winning, turned around and put a 7 burger on the same team.
Oof.
The interesting thing was it was 4 wins and 2 draws in the group stage. They drew Copenhagen and drew Dortmund. So it wasn't lights out in the group stage like Bayern. I think Bayern were the only team that actually won all their games. Um, the stats I have for the Champions League, so for goals scored, they've got 22, so they're third, and then conceded, they've only 3. That was kind of surprising too, because people have been talking about Man City maybe being vulnerable at the back. At least in the Champions League, they haven't. And top scorer,
Yeah.
no surprise, is Holland with 10 goals, scoring 5 in a game. I guess helps with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Gosh.
I mean, for players of the season, obviously, Holland, Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, will maybe always get kind of headlines there. I want to talk about Nathan Ake. Um, because what he brings to the team is different, and obviously Pep made the big call to go with Cancelo and let him go to Bayern, and since then, Ake has kind of been on an insane run of form, and he had an amazing game for Holland versus Gibraltar. Now again, Gibraltar
Yeah,
isn't
amateur
necessarily.
brother.
I don't think they've ever like won a European qualifying game, so that is what it is. But he had something like he had like 8 chances created. And you don't normally think of that from him being a defensive-minded fullback, but he's become, as far as defensive-minded, one of the best fullbacks in all European football at the moment. Just people can't really score on him. I mean, he's done a really good job on Saka. And
Yeah,
you can maybe
scored scored a goal too.
it feels like he can be a pressing right in the FA game.
Mhm.
It feels like he can maybe be a pressing trigger, but so he maybe isn't necessarily that great on the ball yet. But that's the only thing you can maybe say. He's been flying both for City and Holland.
Yeah, he's been good and offense and defensively, and he's pretty versatile. He can play fullback, back, which we've seen out of him. So that's a good sneaky person to pick because when you take away like the obvious people, and Ake is definitely one of them. Um, I mean, I would go maybe Ederson too.
Hmm.
Maybe if things start going well, maybe Ederson can bail them out with saves. Because I think isn't Foden out for a little bit. I think
Yeah. I was going to say that Pep
he has to have
actually
surgery.
Pep said that he won't be available because of appendicitis. I think.
That's right. Yeah, I think he had to have his appendix removed.
So that's
So
going to put pressure on Grealish, Mahrez, and maybe Alvarez to deliver. Which is Foden's actually been since he's returned to the squad. He's been pretty good for them.
getting better and
So
better. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
that could be a big storyline, to be honest. I'm glad you
He could,
highlighted that.
or Alvarez could just fill in, and we forget all about being out.
Maybe, but I think Alvarez is more of a striker, kind of being in the
He
box.
is.
I don't really think of him as a wide player.
Yeah,
Being
that's
forced to
for
be on the
sure.
wing. And we'll kind of move to the positives. Holland gets all kind of the praise, rightly so, but it feels like this is maybe the competition where Kevin. This is like basically Kevin De Bruyne to either be a star and show up, or this is where they're going to fall because it does feel like this City team has basically been built for this competition. I think even Holland said something where he was like, "I've come to a team that's won 4 league titles out of the last like 5. They don't need me to win the league." Basically, he said they brought me in to win this competition. I think he said that after scoring the 7 goals. I think he's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He probably is. I mean, sometimes in the Champions Leagues of past, they have been kind of let down by not having that number 9 that they really need. So yeah, I mean, it really is though like Champions League or bust, especially with the moves that Man City did do. Like not only just bringing out, bringing in like Alvarez, and they got Ake, and I don't know, maybe I mean Phillips. They got Phillips, but he hasn't really panned out. So I think he's right, Ben. Yeah, I think they did kind of get him mainly for the Champions League. This is the one elusive trophy that City haven't won, no matter how much money they pump the squad. They're kind of like PSG in that regard, I guess, where it's like they have
Yeah.
limited funds and buy unlimited players, and they still can't win the one elusive Champions League trophy that they want. Like that's all they want. They don't want legal. I mean, they'll take it, but they don't want Premier League. I mean, they'll take that too. But yeah, I think you're right, Ben. I think you're right. So I don't know. It's been Champions League or bust for a little bit of time with
and
City, but it doesn't seem like there's any bust. They're just like, well, we'll just open up the wallet again in the summer and try again next year.
well, before Holland too. Now they obviously they got lucky with Aguero, but when they bought Aguero, he wasn't seen as like the Mbappe of his time.
Yeah,
When
that's
Aguero
true.
was at Atletico Madrid.
Yeah,
Um, all this time, PSG, what they did is they went out and got Mbappe and Neymar. Obviously, they've added Messi to it. Um, City have basically been doing things differently. Now they've still been spending a lot of money, but they've been adding basically, everyone in their squad is like 50 million or 60 million. They haven't been getting the actual global stars before Holland. Holland is like the first
yeah,
person to kind of break that mold. Um, and speaking of him, if there was one player that maybe is not going to fear that Bayern backline, it probably is him. Upamecano versus Holland's probably going to be where this tie is won or lost for both teams. But speaking of this, I'd be curious to see if Bayern is going to be able to play City the way that they beat PSG because they were able to force Verratti in a couple turnovers. Now we have seen Raja being pressed a little bit, in the last couple of games, and he didn't necessarily look great versus Norway, which is interesting. Kind of focus on Rodri. Normally, you think of Rodri as like Mister Reliable. He hasn't necessarily
Yeah,
had his best month quietly, so that could maybe be something to look at. And then for the concerns and negatives, I put down that the ultimate equalizer really is Pep overthinking things, and it's kind of cliche and kind of like simplistic to say, but I think when he tried a back three for like the first time all season versus Lyon, and that ended up costing them. And then people maybe forget this, but you think of Rodri and you think of Fernandinho a couple years ago when Fernandinho still had his legs and still was a really good player. Pep went into the Champions League final and didn't play with a defensive midfielder,
that's
and that
right.
ended
Yeah,
up showing up. The goal that Chelsea scored basically is a through ball in the middle because there's no one there. I think he played like Gundogan and Bernardo Silva kind of together, and both were caught out of position. And so, what's interesting is the reason why that happened. People also forget is Tuchel was able to get into Pep's head that season. And because
mm,
Tuchel is this is a low key storyline that Bayern have basically brought in Tuchel. I don't know if they had this in mind as well, but Tuchel was able to kind of beat Pep in the FA Cup and the EPL, or at least kind of gave them fits before that Champions League final, and then they basically met like three times in a month or in the last 2 months before that game. And again, Pep was able to Tuchel was able to get into his head. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens again. And Tuchel's going to have two chances to go at Pep this time, not just one.
yeah, yeah. It's going to be 2 games, so it's going to be tough. I don't know. It'll be tough for either one of these teams to lose in a row.
Do you think?
So
Do you think we'll see like the goofy, the back three slash back four, or do you think we'll see like a structured four back with basically four center backs, where perhaps like do not allow Alfonso Davies, Mane, whoever to run in behind you. Basically play don't allow your fullbacks to basically play off in any kind of attack at all. Just basically be defensive minded. Don't allow anything behind you.
I don't know. I don't know because I mean the last game they played they won 7-0 with a back three. But I mean,
Yeah,
but well they had Jones in there was technically a defensive mid. So I don't know. I don't know. I think we'll go with the back four. I think we'll just be solid and pragmatic about it. I think, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like whatever he plays in the first leg, he'll switch it around in the second leg. You
I could
know,
see that.
so
Yeah,
yeah. So if he plays like a back four, he'll play a back three in the second leg. That kind of thing. I think. Which is another reason why they're so hard to beat because Pep can change things. It doesn't. It could be like a half of a four back, or in the second half it's three in the back. You know, so it's part of the reason why they're so hard to beat.
well, this is lame to say because there's all this attacking talent that's going to be out there. Basically, I think the big decision that's going to come down for him is does he play with Kyle Walker at right back or does he play with John Stones? Now,
Ooh.
because John Stones has been able to show he can do a job at fullback, and the only issue is can he stay healthy? But it seems John Stones is maybe Pep's first choice right back now, not necessarily center back. So that would be interesting to see.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah. Hmm.
And I put down that basically football wins because we get Bayern and City for two legs. For whatever game is happening on during that same time, sorry, I'm probably going to be watching the Bayern City game for both.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely.
and I think what did I say? Basically I put down that I do think this is maybe they maybe do have to win this for this year to be a success for them because it does feel like everything they put into this lineup does kind of feel it's been with this competition in mind. And another thing that's kind of noticed is he's tried to limit Kevin De Bruyne's minutes in
Yeah,
this year more than he has in the past. And I feel like
definitely.
he's had it for this stretch in mind as well. And so
Yes, totally. Yeah, I think that's the only reason why it's been resting him is for the Premier League. I mean, well, not for the Premier League, but for Champions League in mind for sure. And he has rested a bunch, so maybe that'll be the wild card. He'll be like fully rested and ready to go, maybe, and that'll be the difference. Who knows?
and I think maybe the place that they are vulnerable is their wide players aren't necessarily great at beating a man 1v1. And if someone needs to show up, I think it needs to be, especially if Foden's not going to be able to go, it's got to have to be Grealish. Time for you to make your paycheck.
Could be Martinez if he gets the opportunity too.
Yep. And then
Maybe.
we'll move on to Real Madrid. They're in second place in the league. Win their league. This is interesting too. 56 points. They trail Barcelona by 12 points in their league. And
Crazy.
it's annoying because they were able to kind of pop Liverpool basically for 6-2 in aggregate over 2 games. And they did have 4 wins and 1 draw and a loss in the group stage, but their form in the league really, I do think, is interesting. And I don't think this is necessarily a Galacticos uh, Real Madrid team, and them drawing Chelsea is interesting as well, which I think we'll get into. But their last 5 games in the league, they've drawn Atletico Madrid. They lost to Barcelona in the Copa del Rey. They drew Real Betis, which Man United smashed in Europa over 2 legs. They were able to beat Espanyol 3-1, and then they lost to Barcelona. And I think they turn around and play Barcelona again in the Copa del Rey. I guess like the second leg. Um, but the key
Interesting.
stats, they have 21 goals, so tied for fourth. They've conceded 8 goals, so the eighth. The top scorer is Vinny Jr. with 6 goals, and then Benzema with 3. Players of the season, I put down Vinny. This is maybe kind of up for debate because I don't really necessarily I haven't followed Real Madrid necessarily in their league, but Vinny with 6 goals and 3 assists in the Champions League, and then 8 goals and 4 assists in La Liga. Isn't that bad of a return for a wide player? He was a little bit better last year, but he's also had to deal with some ugly racist scenes in La Liga this season. I don't know if people have necessarily followed that. So there could be some of that as well. Benzema hasn't necessarily his best team, but he does lead the team with 11 goals in La Liga. Valverde was maybe their player of the season before the World Cup, but he hasn't necessarily been able to keep that for him. And one thing that Jeremy kind of noticed, and I didn't realize it until he mentioned it, but it seems like Camavinga has maybe supplanted Tchouaméni as, like, the lead, number 6, the central defensive, midfielder. Well,
Yeah.
Tchouaméni has been out injured, for some of that, but and it looks like maybe that's the place for France as well, because Camavinga started over Tchouaméni as well, and Camavinga started to look incredible. So,
Yeah, he's a good player. Really good player.
and so I mean, concerns, negatives, it's a weird team because it feels like Ancelotti's future is up in the air as well. Like, uh, for some reason, a lot of Real Madrid fans thought they were gonna get Tuchel. Um, and it just feels like they haven't necessarily clicked. Benzema hasn't been the same player he was last season, which I guess makes sense. He played out of his mind last season. I do think the Tchouaméni and Camavinga storyline is interesting because it doesn't feel like they can play together. At least they haven't shown that so far. And
Mhm.
I put down something that they don't have what Vinny offers on the right side. Rodrigo to me is maybe more of a false nine. They've tried Valverde there. Valverde is more of a central midfielder. So it does feel like their lineup can maybe sometimes be off balance.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's part of the reason why they've kind of dug themselves a little bit of a hole in La Liga as well.
And the leadoff story, I think, it just the way to kind of talk about this team is it felt like they had this plan in place, a perfect plan in place. Well, one, they never had a plan in place for Ronaldo leaving them, and they screwed up there.
Mhm.
But they brought in like Eden Hazard and Jovetic, and that just basically ended up being a $200 million in the hole. It did feel like they had their plan for Mbappe to join them, and then that didn't happen. So they went out and brought Tchouaméni to the squad, sold Casemiro to do it, and I don't think that's necessarily made them better. Though it does feel like Camavinga started to play a little bit more in that middle, and he started to look good for them. So,
Yeah, true.
but one thing that's interesting is all year they've been linked to Jude Bellingham as well as Liverpool, and I this is maybe just me kind of talking. I don't think he makes them better. I look at what they look at. I think they need a Benzema replacement, and I think they need a right winger. Maybe they need to look at fullback. And Rodrigo is maybe the answer to Benzema, but I look at if I was maybe their recruitment squad, I would look at Kalu Muani, Randall Kalu Muani,
Ooh,
of Frankfurt,
yeah,
to
he's
maybe
been
be.
good.
He can play on the wide side. He can play out wide, but he can also lead the line. Obviously, him also being French maybe helps as well. He could maybe be your Benzema replacement.
Yeah, yeah, he would be a great replacement too. He also French as well, so I don't know. He'll be moving up the French national team lineup as well, moving up the chart there.
Yeah, he started that was another game that I saw. I was able to saw that thank you for Fox. They had the France Ireland game where Koulibaly he started out wide, but then they tried Jabber didn't work. They tried playing him in the middle, and France ended up winning that game with it wasn't necessarily through him, but I think Pavard had like an amazing shot. But
That's
anyways,
right. Yeah.
uh, I mean, maybe a storyline here is it's 3 straight years that Chelsea and Real Madrid have faced each other, And what's funny is, not a single time has Eden Hazard really featured in any of these meetings. Um, it's Rudiger facing his old team as well, and there's a lot of players actually that are involved in both of these teams. Like, it's Courtois' old team. He gets to face his old team again. It's kind
Yeah,
of funny how that's all worked out. Kovacic, I think, Mateo Kovacic, was at
Kovacic.
Madrid before joining Chelsea. So, it's funny how that's all
Yeah,
worked out.
interesting. Yeah, and then obviously we talked about the Bayern Munich and the City Knicks too. So that's pretty cool. That's another good like piece of this puzzle in the Champions League.
And, Chelsea beat them, I guess 2 years ago to make the final in the semifinal, and then, Real Madrid was able to kind of outlast them last year, also needing extra time. So regardless of what Chelsea's been able to do or Chelsea's form has been in the EPL, I think they're gonna look at, Real Madrid and think, we can absolutely take them on." So, we'll move on to Chelsea because, they are 10th in the league with 38 points. Um, and before the Dortmund game, Chelsea had drawn basically 3 straight. So they had drawn Liverpool, Fulham, and West Ham, and then they lost 1-0 to Southampton. They lost 2-0 to Spurs. They beat Leeds 1-0, and I think that goal was from a corner kick. Then they beat Leicester 3-1, and then they drew Everton 2-2. And the run in the Champions League, they were able they lost to Dortmund 1-0, and they were able to turn around and win the second one 2-0. The stats for the goal scored, I have 12 goals, so they're 12th in that category. But 5 goals conceded, so they're third in that. The top scorer is interesting though, because this is funny. It's Sterling at 3 goals, and then for the Champions League, it's Mudryk, and this is because
Oh,
of what he did for Shakhtar.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, Shakhtar.
And then Havertz on 2 goals. I mean, for players of the season, I don't really have. I couldn't really think of anything because no one's really been a player of the season for them. But I do think they look better since Fofana has returned for them, so that maybe helps out. And really,
Yeah,
I think the leadoff story is, can Potter prove the doubt is wrong? Because this is really big for him, not just Chelsea. I think if he can get past Ancelotti's Madrid side, especially with Potter being English as well, I think that really would help his reputation.
yeah, I think it would. Yeah, I mean it's already sliding a little bit recently, so
And I mean, but that said, he has made a weird call here because, they brought in so many players and you're limited to how many players you can have on the Champions League roster. He decided to not take Batshuayi with him, so I guess he had to give Mudryk and Enzo roster spots. So
yeah, so
if they do a back three, it'll have to be like Mark Cucurella back there. You can't play Batshuayi, and I think Batshuayi's been good for them. So
he
that's
has been, yeah, and he's been playing a
that
lot lately
that's a
too.
little interesting, but, um,
Huh.
out of maybe their new signings, who do you maybe look at that could maybe star or help Chelsea advance? And I guess, do you give them a puncher's chance, as I said?
Yeah, I think so. Just because they have the players. I mean, I think it's still Endo Fernandez to me. He does a lot of work in the midfield, and
That's a good call.
he hasn't been like some games he's a little off, but he's not terrible. Like he's always playing hard in the midfield at least. So I think I would pick him just to kind of keep everything going in terms of the new players they got, because you still can't really rely on Felix that much.
I agree.
Fofana's been pretty good. Fofana's been good, honestly. So maybe Fofana and Fernandez for me.
I
But
like that.
Indo just he's a good midfielder, and I like what he does. And even if he's having off, he's still probably better than what they have behind him. Probably better than like Gallagher, and I mean maybe better than Mason Mount. Maybe I don't know, but maybe he plays with Mason Mount. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't. You mentioned maybe he was dealing with some kind of injury, but we haven't seen Mason Mount kind of feature a whole lot for the last kind of month or so.
Yeah,
Sterling has been kind of hit and miss for them as well. We haven't necessarily seen him,
yeah. Sterling's been
and
good.
we haven't really seen Mudryk kind of take off a little bit I guess in the league, but I saw Mudryk play Real Madrid in the group stage. He actually looked really, really good versus them
Yeah.
at Shakhtar. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe he doesn't start. Maybe he just comes on in the second half. I'd like to see Mudryk maybe kind of maybe do something. So
Huh. Okay, I like that.
um, And it'll be very interesting to see how Potter kind of goes about this because, Ancelotti has made some comments, at least a little bit, how managers kind of play the game in England. He took some shots at Klopp.
Mhm.
There's some reputations again on the line here. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting. Good storylines.
And this is maybe the most fun team to talk about. Maybe we should have let off with this because we talk about Chelsea, Man City, and whatnot every single game show. We'll talk about Napoli. 71 points for 27 games played. Now, this is after you've had 27 games. This is where you should be. You should be in the 70 mark, not wherever uh, uh, Bayern Munich was. I guess like in the 50s. The first place, and they've a 19-point lead over second. This has
Ooh,
absolutely been killing it. They've maybe only lost one game this whole season, at least in the league. I think Liverpool beat them in the Champions League, but that game didn't even matter. They lost 2-0 for that, but that's the only game they've lost in the Champions League. Other than that, they've won everything, and I think they're closest to to Bayern Munich when it comes to the most points accumulated in the group stage. Um,
wow.
in the last 5 games, they did lose to Lazio, but it was, I guess it was it one, there was yeah, I guess they lost that game. And then the last game
Yeah,
was a
wow.
4-0 win over Torino. Um, and then they were able to kind of, go past Frankfurt. Carlo Morani had a red card, in the first game, so that kinda killed the tie, and then they were able to win the second one 3-0. Victor Osimhen has started to just really just have fun whenever he plays. Um
Oh yeah,
And I mean,
yeah. He's
for
great.
for the for the key stats, so they've got 25 goals. So they've scored the most in the group stage, or in the competition. But another thing here is they've created 38 big chances.
Ooh,
And to put that in perspective, Man City have created 29, Benfica 29, Real Madrid 28, and then Bayern. You think of Bayern's like high scoring offense. They've only created 26, and then they've only conceded 6 goals. So they're fourth in that category as well. But the weird thing here is their top scorer is only on 4 goals. So for scoring all that, so they're getting goals from just everywhere. But it's Victor Osimhen and then Zelensky and Raspadori.
yeah. Ugh. They're so good and they're so fun to watch. And attacking wise, they're great. I'm kind of disappointed they're playing Milan just because it would be nice to see a matchup that they won't play domestically. But I think it'll still be a really really good tie
It's
because
weird.
Milan isn't no slouch either.
It's so weird because so they've only played them one time in the league, and it was like back in September. Do you even risk playing, playing any kind of starter? Like you've already like got the league basically sealed up. Do you just play like a bunch of like reserve squad players essentially? Because I don't know if you know this, they play I think this coming week. So they play each
Really.
other in the actual league before the Champions League. They play each other like 3 times in like 18 days.
Yeah, maybe they show them something completely different this weekend than what they're planning on playing in the Champions League. Kind of throw them off a little bit, or rest some players that normally start, but rest them for the Champions League game because the league is in hand,
Just
like you
pay,
said.
just play like a front nine with like one player, or do like what was the formation that we did with the FIFA? It was like that Ireland team.
Absolutely, 8 back and one striker up top.
Like, it started with a B. It wasn't Burnley. Ah, shoot.
Bray,
Bray
we're the
Wanderers.
Bray, yeah, Bray,
Play the Bray formation. Be like, this is what we're gonna show you for the group
9
stage.
back, 10 back, one up top.
Play the keeper as the starting striker.
Oh God, yeah,
All right. I mean, for players of the season, it probably is Osimhen. 21 goals in Serie A with 4 assists. And then he's leading the league or leading the team in Champions League as well. I mean, Caradona. I'm not going to say his first name. Creature. Or I'm not going to say
that's
not
yeah.
going to say his last name. 4 assists in the Champions League. 12 goals in Serie A. His expected goals though is 6, which is wild. So he's outpacing his expected goals by 6 goals. That's pretty impressive. And then he's got
That is
10
impressive.
and then he's got 10 assists in this area. And then maybe a name that maybe people aren't necessarily familiar of is Manje Kim, a center back. And this guy's been brought in to replace Koulibaly, and man, has he done a good job
He's
doing
been
that.
great.
And one of the reasons why Napoli have such a high flying attack is because you've got defenders like him that are just absolutely excellent on the ball. I think I saw for his last game he had 98% pass accuracy.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
He's got excellent vision to pick out runners, but he's just good when being pressed. And
Mm.
yeah, and he hasn't necessarily shown that he's vulnerable defending as well. He's a really good player, good in the air as well.
Yeah, yeah, really good. Started for South Korea too
Yeah,
in the World Cup.
and I don't necessarily want to make a negative comment, but it was interesting how like basically every single player or every single defender, last name was Kim. I remember being like, oh, one of their defenders is like starring for Napoli, and it was like who, and I said Kim, and he was like all of them are Kim, and I was like, God damn it.
Literally, I get 12 chems.
All right. I mean, for positives, I do have some like, interesting thoughts to say about Napoli. I mean, because like when you look at how most teams kind of set up in the Champions League, sometimes do see deep blocks and teams like set up to counter, especially in like, and it's interesting how you see a lot of that in the Italian league. Like that's kind of like the Italian style, just kind of defend and counter. And Napoli almost set up perfectly to destroy that because you have wires that can beat their defenders 1v1. They can they like taking players on. They have good delivery when they do cross it, and Osimhen is a handful to cover in the box. I mean, he's strong in the air, and he's got a really good shot on him. And another thing that's maybe unique is you have defenders that can create on their own. They aren't afraid of being carried the ball when there's space. I saw this when I saw them play Liverpool. Liverpool tried to press him, and just it was rough. Uh, actually,
Yeah.
rough isn't necessarily the way to put it. It was a disaster, a massacre
Yes.
is maybe the way to put it. 'Cause they destroyed
Yeah.
them. They could have won that game 8-0 in the first leg. Um, I mean, because Lobotka is a clever cover player who kind of plays in deep formations. Zelensky is a goal scoring midfielder. Zambo and Grisa has been really good when he's played. They also have they have the former Spurs midfielder that's good with the ball at his feet as well. Shoot, I should remember his name, but I don't. Uh,
Let me look.
and then for concerns and negatives, the only thing I can think of is outside the midfield depth. It's not the depth is outside of the midfield. Depth isn't necessarily a strength of theirs. So like when
Oh,
you look
And Dombele, is that who you're talking about?
in Dumbledore, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's maybe the only concern. I mean, I don't know who their left winger is if something happens to Caradona. Obviously, I think Osimhen's backup is like Gio Simeone's son.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
Giovanni Suso.
on the
Okay.
right side is maybe kind of the issue because it's like it's either Chucky uh, not Hernandez, Chucky Irving, no, Chucky Lozano,
Yeah.
or like Raspadori or Politano. But you don't. It
But
doesn't
yeah,
seem like they have something that can offer on the same on the left side as they do on the right side. Similar to what Madrid have. So that's maybe you're kind of grasping at straws a little bit there because they've got creation everywhere else.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't want to play against them. That's for sure. And they've just been on a tear domestically too.
And one thing that's very interesting as well is I'm curious if you've seen this quote. This took maybe I wanted to write it down because I mean they've been able to build this team basically on like rocks and glue. Sounds Osimhen. I mean Osimhen was brought in I guess in that COVID year as the second most expensive transfer other than Havertz.
Okay.
People maybe forget that. And the interesting, but aside from that, because they were able to kind of rebuild, losing Koulibaly, they lost that one striker or that one like midfielder that ended up going to the MLS. That was really good for Italy and Euros. I forget his name as well, but so
Yeah. Yeah, I know you.
they've had a little rebuild, but the manager that they brought in, he's kind of been. I don't want to necessarily been he's a career journeyman because he had a lot of success at Roma. He's had success elsewhere in the league, but we haven't necessarily seen this. But he has a philosophy about the game that I think is unique. So basically, he's come out and said that he doesn't believe that in modern football there's such a thing as a formation anymore. So he says
Hmm.
systems no longer exist in the modern game. So it's all about spaces left by the opposition. So you must be quick and you must be quick to spot them and know the right moment to strike but you must have the courage to move when being pressed. And it does make sense because when you think about maybe every manager doesn't necessarily think this in their head or they're not going to say this publicly, but in their head it almost feels like a lot of teams kind of think this way because it feels like everyone has a different formation or system. uh, every game when they play with the ball or without the ball. And so the idea of fluid movement and not necessarily having rigid positions, I think holds true.
Yeah, I think so too. Honestly.
And you get a sense that there's a lot of De Zerbi in here, in this as well. And it's one thing I wanted to highlight is it's unique to see this from Italian managers because we're so used to seeing uh, uh, what the Juventus manager we're so used to seeing. Obviously Marino's not necessarily Italian, but we're used to seeing what he does at Roma. We're used to seeing what Ancelotti used to do at AC Milan. And it's been or Conte. Conte would be another kind of, defensive-minded first manager, and it
Oh
does
yeah.
feel like there's been kind of a change, a little bit. Maybe it started with Sarri, but, De Serbi, Italian, Man City when he won Italy, Euros, was able to play, good stuff on the eye as well, and the idea is to be a little bit more inventive, having the ball, not necessarily being defend first. Actually, your first island of defense is offense.
Yeah. That's definitely the case with Napoli, at least. Maybe the rest of the league will look at them and be like, okay, we need to do what they're doing.
And, the manager at, not Udinese, the manager at Atalanta, uh, Gasperini, he's also been, attack minded. He's brought the idea of, like, playing high, fullbacks or wingbacks. So, it's interesting to see kind of a tactic, revolution, in Italy, which I think is good. I think it's good to see. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Unfortunately,
definitely.
the teams that are being rewarded for it, you know, uh, the Milans and whatnot, and I guess Juventus was able to make it in Europa. They aren't necessarily a part of that yet. So it's good to see Napoli in Champions League advancing, but we'll get to the other Italian sides. They're still playing. They're still playing a different kind of football, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely.
And let's see. You kind of mentioned it. It's weird how they have drawn a Serie A rival, and they're probably, depending on what Benfica does, it's possible they'll have to face, another Serie A rival to make the final. But I think every single Napoli fan would take a look at the draw and be like, so we get to avoid Man City, Bayern, and Chelsea. I think they would take that.
Yeah, I think so too, honestly, for sure. Because it could have been a lot worse.
And
Not great, but it could have been worse.
and to maybe make I don't want to say an insensitive comment. If Napoli do go on to do something here, and keep this run going. You factor this with what happened with Argentina. Um, Maradona might be looked at a bit of like a saint, uh, because everything this would have been kind of a good, Napoli is probably most known for having Maradona as their player, and it just feels like it's been a really good time for people that I guess that were fans of Maradona. They were able to kind of see this all happen in the same time span.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe in the same year, World Cup
Right.
and then Napoli win
That's kind of what I was.
Champions League.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy.
That's what I was getting at. And so, speaking of Italian sides, we'll stick with that and go to AC Milan. 48 points in the league, fourth place, which isn't terrible, but they're only 3 points in front of Roma and Atalanta, so it's not secure yet. And their last 5 games in the league, they did have a win over Atalanta, so that helps them. But they did lose to Florentino, 2-1. They did draw Salernitana.
Salernitana, yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Salernitana.
There, I should let you do the names. They did draw that 1-1, and then they lost 3-1 to Udinese. And then they run in the Champions League. They were able to advance past Spurs because of that 1-0 win in the first game. And that goal happened relatively early in that game, and then they basically just kind of defended, and they defended well. But again, it's not necessarily the best on the eye. Um,
Yeah.
as far as the key stats, 13 goals scored. They're ninth in that category. 7 goals conceded, so they're fifth. Their top scorer is both Leao and Giroud with 8 goals in Serie A, which is interesting. That Giroud's only got 8 goals for Serie A, and then Giroud does lead with 4 goals in the Champions League. But for the players of the season, it's kind of a mush. So I went with probably Rafael Leao. He does have six assists with those 8 goals. He's been maybe the one bright spot. Benacer and Tonali do offer them pretty good midfield control.
Yeah,
Um,
Tonali's great.
and then Teo Hernandez and Tomari have been pretty good in bright spots, at least for the back end. And then Their keeper is maybe an up and coming star. He actually started for France, with Lloris being out, and had a couple really big saves versus Ireland and Maginan.
Oh yeah, yeah, Mannion,
Man, oh,
Mannion,
I can't. Damn it. Good
Mike
reference.
Mannion.
And so,
Yeah, he's from where is he from? Lille, Lille. Yeah,
oh, I didn't know that. Um,
yeah,
but it's funny because they lost Donnarumma to PSG, and they've just been able to just
that's right.
pick out the next up and comer, and he definitely looks the part. He looked good.
He does. Yeah, he looks good.
And what's interesting is a name I didn't say, and he came on as a bench sub yesterday in the Belgium game that I was watching. Is Charles de Ketelaere. It doesn't feel like he's being able to kind of show up for them, and unfortunately, Origi hasn't necessarily worked out for them either.
Yeah, unfortunately. Ugh.
And
But they almost don't need him. Like they don't need him with Ibrahimovic back and Giroud. I feel like, but
wait, is Ibra there? Oh, I hadn't even forgot about that. But with
Ibra, yeah,
I just feel like Giroud, I feel like maybe his time is maybe done. He didn't necessarily impress me a little bit when I was watching France. I know he had a good World Cup, but anyways,
yeah,
um, I mean, I guess the lead story is 3 Italian clubs did make the round of 8. For a lot of talk for them maybe kind of being, Italian football maybe being past it. And Italy did win Euros, so Italian football is maybe having a little resurgence. Roma and
yeah.
Juventus, I do think, advanced in the next stages in Europa, as well. So,
Roma did
uh,
for sure.
for the most part, now AC Milan and Inter are maybe stumbling a little bit into this, but it is something.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, domestically, the title almost seems to be done and dusted. But at least you're getting three teams through is pretty good. I would say
Yeah. And,
really good.
they did muck it up, and they were able to advance for Spurs, and, I have said, haven't necessarily been that complimentary of their play style, but it's weird
Yeah,
because when you look at their roster, the names do pop off.
yeah.
Um,
They got a lot on the
and
bench too, like Rebic and
the pedigree is maybe, when you compare it to Napoli, at least when it comes to what they've done in their careers, it maybe does favor them a little bit. So, it with Giroud, Leao, Benacer, Tonali, Teo Hernandez, all of them feature for their national teams.
yeah.
Uh, um,
Salamakers is
Salamakers,
good too.
right? Yeah, and so maybe they'll also look at Napoli, and while obviously they've had a lot of success in their league, maybe they'll like their chances because they've at least seen them. They recognize a little bit of this. Um,
Yeah, I think they will like their chances. Yeah, just a little bit of a familiarity with playing a domestic team might help.
yeah. So there's, I guess, the other side to that, and then the other Milan team is Inter Milan, and they're in their third place in their league with 50 points. The last 5 games for them, they did win 3-1 over Udinese, but they've suffered 3 losses, and then Inter have they've beaten Lecce, but they
Much
lost to Bologna, Spezia. Oh, there we go. Who would say that name? And then they lost to Juventus. And then their
Mm.
run in the Champions League was very similar. They won their first game versus Porto 1-0, and then just basically mucked it up and just killed their second game 0-0. And I watched because that was on during the 7-0 Man City game. After
Oh, you watched that?
after Pep took off Holland, I was like, well, there's no reason to watch this anymore. I was like, go for the six, go for this. I was kind of rooting that on. I
Yeah.
I switched it over to the Porto game, and it was rough viewing. Inter was not even trying to do any kind of attack, and they didn't care about having the ball. It was booted away as much as possible and play with 10 men behind in the box, and it was rough viewing. But
Yeah.
it worked. They were able to advance. For the key stats, I do have something interesting to say here. So the goal scored, they have 11 goals. It's 13th best, which is not great. But they've got the third most big chances missed with 16. So they've created a decent number of chances. They just haven't necessarily been able to finish them. And let's see, AC Milan was actually fourth in that category with 15 big missed chances. So
Really?
that's interesting. The goal scored should be a little bit higher up. Maybe their play has warranted a little better offensive output. So that's maybe something to have in the back mind. And then
Yeah.
for goals conceded, they have 7, so 7th place for that. The top scorer is Lautaro Martinez, at least for Serie A, with 14 goals. Dzeko is second with 7 in Serie A, and then in the Champions League, Dzeko with 3. And one name I didn't say is Lukaku which is interesting. And Lukaku is, at least in the Champions League, he does have 2 goals for that. And the reason why they were able to advance past Porto is Lukaku, I think, had the game-winning goal in that first game. And so maybe I think that's maybe kind of the storyline here because Lukaku has come in and he's looked fantastic for the last 2 games for Belgium. Maybe he hasn't necessarily had his best season returning from Inter. I think he's still a Chelsea player. But if he can maybe get going for them, he maybe turns this team around.
Yeah, and they have a easy draw comparatively to who else is there. So yeah, if they can get Lukaku going and get favorable draws, you could see them in the final potentially. Which is
And
crazy to say with all the other teams we got.
that is
But
crazy to say. And that whoever, if Man City did make the final, they would have to win that game because there's no way. I
yeah,
wonder, would Lukaku be able to play for Chelsea? That would be funny.
I don't
Uh,
know. Is he he's a Chelsea player still?
Chelsea were able to. Yeah, he is. Uh,
Damn.
this was another stat that popped up. So of the teams remaining, Inter have the worst possession stats with
Okay.
47%. So Man City, Barca 1 and 2. That's not surprising, but number 3
Yeah.
it's Chelsea.
Really? That is. Yeah, that is surprising.
So I mean, players of the season. Um, I did. I kind of took a guess. Challenuga, at least when I looked at his stats, seems to be like their most important player when it comes to like winning the ball back and at least like making decisions on the ball. Um,
Mm,
and then Nico Barella is someone that I've always kind of looked at as like someone that I would like maybe at Liverpool. He's very good when he's being pressed. He makes good decisions. And then you look at the back. One thing that you can maybe praise Inter Milan for is their back three of Bastoni and Asabi are very good on the ball. Bastoni can actually get forward, and he likes to he as a center back he's actually really good at like making attacking moves, which is unique to say. And then
yeah.
their keeper, Onana, I think they got from Ajax, has been pretty good for them.
Yeah, he's a good keeper. Yeah.
And then, similar story with AC Milan. They felt like both Milan teams really did, scrap and claw their way to advance past the last round.
Mhm.
Let's see. And another thing to maybe say about them is it feels like maybe they're still kind of transitioning from the squad that like Conte helped build up. So for them to just kind of be here, I guess is positive. But you look at all the players that they brought in, it's almost entirely guys that have already been established in Serie A, so it doesn't feel like they've had their minds on Champions League because it's like Çalhanoğlu, I think they got from AC Milan, Dzeko, I
Yeah.
think they got from Roma, Lukaku, they already had, but you got Lukaku maybe is the one exception, and then Mkhitaryan is another player who I think was at Roma before this. So
Oh, interesting. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
and then let's see, we'll move on to Benfica, who they'll be playing. And Benfica is another kind of we're picking them last, but their storyline is fun too because of what they've been able to do despite losing all their star players. Um, I mean, so they're first place in their league. In the last 5 games, really the last like 10 games I looked at, they haven't really lost. They haven't lost a game. At least in regulation, they drew Braga and then lost in PKs in some kind of cup competition. But that's it. They've been flying despite losing Enzo Fernandez. So, and then
Yeah.
they're running the Champions League. They won the first game 2-0 versus Brugge, and then 5-1. Just absolutely demolishing them. Goal scored. This is surprising too. They're 23 goals, and
Ooh.
I, I'm fairly certain that they were in that same group with like Bayern Munich and Barcelona. Um,
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
so that's they're. I mean, they're the reason they were here over that Barca. And you're seeing what Barca's doing in Europa, and you're seeing, well, I shouldn't say in Europa. You're seeing what Barca's doing in Spain, and so it's a good
Yeah.
Barca team.
It is. Yeah.
So this
Yeah,
is
it really is.
this is worth to take Benfica seriously. 23 goals is second most. Man City are third in that category with 22. The only thing is they've conceded 8 goals, so they're in 10th place for that. But the top goal scorer is Joao Mario with 6 goals, and then Rafa Silva with 5 goals. And then in the domestic league, it's Joao Mario also with 17 goals, and then Gonzalo Ramos with 16 goals. But and maybe the player of the season is, you lost Enzo Fernandez, but you've been able to get by with maybe Florentino Luis, who's just he was always the defensive minded midfielder in that pivot. Enzo was more like the attacking creative guy. where Louise was more of a kind of cut attacks out, be again be more defensive, win the tackles, win the duels. That's continued. Drow Mario to have 17 goals is second most in the team as a midfielder, and Rafa Silva. So you're getting goals from midfield, and you're getting goals from not just the one striker. So they're a dangerous team, to be honest.
I think so. Yeah, Dev Grimaldo's been pretty good, and I was surprised to see they have Julian Drexler. So David Neres is another one
Neres, right?
from
Yep.
Holland. So yeah, they're a dangerous team. I mean, the only reason why we're kind of like underestimating them a little bit is just because out of the other teams, they're definitely the one where you're like, huh, they don't necessarily, but they
Well,
got a fighter's chance to move on.
the only spot that I looked at least, just a quick glance, where I was like, that could maybe be an issue is they do have Otamendi starting at center back for them. Now I know
Yeah,
Otamendi, is a World Cup winner, started in the final, but still, I look at him like maybe he's good on the ball, but I still like maybe he could be maybe be vulnerable. Especially you think of Lukaku versus him in a duel. I don't
yeah,
necessarily think I would, or even Dzeko. I don't necessarily know if I would favor Otamendi in that. Um,
yeah. He's too old,
but I mean,
but he's experienced at
to
least.
start the season, they lost Darwin Núñez, and then in the season you've lost Enzo Fernandez, and they've still been able to carry on losing or winning like 10 whatever it is in a row. They've been flying.
Yeah, they have a strong lead at the top too of the Portuguese. What do they call it? I forget, but
So yeah.
but they're top of the table by I think 11 points.
Hmm.
So they got a nice healthy lead.
And so I guess that's maybe it. That's our little preview. Do we have I mean, do you have anything you want to maybe add? Like who's someone that who maybe the top three that you'd maybe favor right now to make the final?
Ooh. I think the winner of the Bayern City game, I would favor for
Yep.
them to make it to the final, and then I really think Napoli. I think Napoli's playing very well. I think Napoli's got a good chance too. So I don't know. I think it would for me it would be Napoli, and then I really don't between Bayern and City. So I would just say the winner of that and Napoli in the
I would
final,
agree. Yeah, those would probably be
which
my
would
three
be
as well.
be a great final. I think if we see Napoli in the final, it's going to be a good final
We
just
seen
because of how fun.
we see Napoli versus City, and
Oof.
you see those that because they'll do a 4-3-3, and you'll see basically even though his coach says he doesn't like to do formations or systems, it'll be three midfielders. And it'll be interesting to see how Man City would necessarily cope with a physical midfield like that because again, they absolutely dominated Liverpool. They couldn't handle that. And you look at who Man City do have Rodri back there, but if there's a squad, we mentioned how maybe Man City struggle with wide creation from their wide players. They maybe struggle a little bit in duels sometimes when teams are physical against them.
Yeah,
I don't think that would be a good matchup for them
yeah, that's a
if they
good
were to
point.
face Napoli in the final. But Napoli's got to find a way to get to the final. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
true.
We'll
Yeah,
see.
it's gonna be interesting. I'm excited for it to return.
And well, maybe next year we'll be talking about your team. Well, actually, unless something drastic happens,
Maybe. Yeah, yeah. Hopefully they get in the top four.
we'll have to be talking about your team. So
Yeah, it could be.
we'll probably won't be talking about my team. So there we go. We'll call it your.
Yeah.
You'll be the host next year, Rex.
Ooh, for Europa or for Euro. No more Thursday games.
There we go. All right, I guess that's it. So we'll be back next week to maybe finally talk about EPL again. Probably talk, hopefully talk a good thing about the Liverpool and City game. Who Arsenal have? I didn't actually look. We'll talk
Dude,
about
I
Arsenal as well, and just kind of
can't
just
remember.
do what we normally do a rundown of the EPL. So thank you for joining us. I guess that's all we have to say, and I guess for us two at the reserve squad, you stay squatty
Stay squatty.
and stop recording.
Nice.